how it works is you write a letter and it goes into your file and it gets sent to the agency in Korea. And then that way, if my birth family were to ever want to check up on me, they could go to the agency and say, like, please look up information for this child. And then my letter would be there. So I wrote a letter and sent a photo with just generic information and didn't expect to get anything back. And then I got a phone call saying that they found my birth mother and my father, that they were married, and I had a brother and a sister.
Welcome to a Face Project podcast. Face Project podcast.
Hello?
It's just pure life. It's pure
my
innocence.
mom
It's
is a
pure
writer. My
gratitude.
So I ended up in America.
I am an adopted
because
Korean and have been all my
To me,
life.
it's a perfect blend of science and creativity.
I was screaming, I will live over here till I die.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. My name is Natalie Jennings. This is a Face Project podcast, episode number 2. One of the main themes of today's story is the meaning of family. Because community is such a huge part of this project and what makes it so much fun, we wanted to ask a small group of people what family meant to them. And here's what they had to say. And just a note that these conversations were all recorded over the phone, so you'll notice that the audio quality, particularly on my end of things, can be a little bit shaky in spots.
Okay, it should be recording now. In your own words, can you describe to me what family means to you?
Family to me is unconditional love. Anyone who loves you or you love unconditionally is family, whether it's friends, could even be coworkers, anyone who will help you see through the tough times, or just loves you unconditionally. How about that?
Hi, my name is Susan, and I'm from Minnesota. And family to me is a gift of love, strength, and support. And spending time with my family and making memories are a real treasure to me.
So the question is, what does family mean to me?
That's right.
Well, now I'm on the spot. Family to me means support and love from the people that you love the most, and also good fun.
In today's episode, you'll hear from Julia, who shares her story about deciding to travel from Minnesota to Korea to meet her biological family for the first time as an adult. One of the things that stood out to me when I first heard Julia's story was a letter that her biological father in Korea had written to her after they first made contact. It offers a unique glimpse into her father's thoughts and feelings after Julia was placed for adoption. Here's Julia reading that letter to open her story.
Dear Julia, after spending 3 or 4 days of indescribable feeling since hearing from you, I write to you. I will call you a daughter even though I don't deserve to be called a father. The relationship between parent and children are called the moral laws of heaven because it has been created by the power of God. However, I didn't obey this rule of moral laws, not raising you in my arms and also not finding you first. Before asking for forgiveness from God, I ask for your forgiveness. I thank you for defeating all difficulties, hardships of life, for becoming such a wonderful young woman. As I think about you, it's heartbreaking. I ask myself, what was I doing all these years when my daughter was searching for me first, and I realized there is no excuse. 20 years gone fast. After you were separated from your mom, I was getting ready to leave Seoul. I couldn't forgive myself for my immoral, unethical actions as I sent you off. Then, your mom called asking me to meet even though we were split. Then she said, if we were to split, later on in the future, our daughter won't be able to find us, or we won't be able to find her, and I can't let that happen. Time flew by and my daughter has found us. Thank you, God. I thank your parents for raising you and also thank both organizations. Your dad, I am 52 years old, your mom is 47, and we live in a small suburb of Seoul. Your siblings are Yoonhan, 22 years old, and Youngjin, 20 years old. I have a lot to say, but my eyes are filled with tears. Looking back, it's full of regrets, but if you have the slightest intention for forgiveness, we hope to meet you sometime, and we'll be waiting for your reply. To my dear daughter from a sinful father. I am an adopted Korean and have been all my life. So I grew up with my adopted parents, and I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me, also adopted from Korea. We're not blood related. My parents also came from a circle of friends who were all very diverse. I grew up, one of my other best friends had gay parents, and that was just always a part of my life. And they were adopted from India, and so growing up I was surrounded by diversity until basically high school. But family just always meant to me like whoever it is that takes care of you, who raises you. And as I grew older, family became whoever is there for you and supports you and is going to love you unconditionally, no matter the circumstance. A lot of adopted kids talk about like having a hole in their life or a void or this emptiness or unanswered questions, and that was not me at all. I remember telling my friends when I was in middle school, like, I have enough drama with my own parents, I don't need another set. And when I was in 8th grade, my sister decided that she wanted to search for her birth family. And my parents asked me if I wanted to go to Korea with them or to search, and I just flat out said no, because it wasn't important to me, and I never thought it would be. And even when I did finally do a search, it wasn't out of wanting to meet them or find them or learn about them. It was purely logistics, because I got married to my college boyfriend when I was 22, and we'd been married for less than a year when he really decided that he wanted to go to Korea to teach English. And so we decided that's what we were going to do that following fall. And I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to be in the country, I might as well just look, because I'll feel like an idiot if I'm there and like see my mom every day and like never know who she was. I went on vacation knowing that I found them, but not having any correspondence from them yet. And I was driving back from vacation when I got the email that had scanned copies of the letters, translations, and photos of my family. And I was sitting in the Oasis right outside Chicago, where that like the bridge with like McDonald's and Panda Express and Sbarro. And I didn't have a smartphone at the time, but my friend did. And so I was like, give me your phone. And I logged into Gmail and like sitting at this tiny table in the Oasis over whatever highway, whatever that is, reading these letters and these words from my birth family and my mom and my dad and my sister and my brother, and like seeing photos of them. It was crazy. It was crazy. My husband and I actually got divorced and ended up not going to Korea. And so when I was reading their letters, their first letters to me, and seeing their photos was when I was driving home after having decided to get divorced. And so those letters came at like a very critical time for me to know that like I had people who had my back no matter what, and no matter what happened, and without really knowing me at all. And so it was really overwhelming, I guess, to think that, yeah, I'm going through this really, really tough time, but no matter what, if everything falls apart, am I allowed to swear? Okay. If things like go to shit here, I can just like move to Korea and like live with my family there. Like, that's great. And so it was nice to kind of have that feeling of like, no matter what, I have the support. And I knew I would have it from my adopted family too, but there's something about having unconditional love from people that you've never seen or talked to that was really impactful, I think. One of the amazing things is that I had to write to my family and say I'm not coming anymore to Korea, and I told them why. And I was like horrified at what they would say, because I wasn't sure in Korea how they feel about divorce? Like, is that good? Is that bad? Is it common, not common? And they wrote back, and my mom, my dad, and my sister and my brother all wrote me a letter, I think, separately. And like all of them were just like, we just want you to be happy and we love you no matter what. And like, you're really brave and we just want you to do the things that are best for you. And whenever you're ready to come, like, we're ready to see you. And I remember feeling such a sense of relief. It was the first time when I really felt like, okay, like I am really happy that I have this family. They're not just these people anymore who happen to just look like me or be similar to me. Now I know that it's a real investment of love and trust and caring. So in a very short time span, all of this happened, where I had had a lifetime of not ever thinking about it or caring. And then very quickly, it all just kind of fell into my lap. So finally, after 2 years of like getting my life back together after getting divorced and figuring out kind of how I was and how I wanted to continue my life, I finally felt comfortable and ready to go and meet them. So my mom and I went to Korea for 12 days, I think, and toured around Korea with a group of other families with adopted kids. And I remember we landed and we were on the bus going from the airport to our hotel, and my social worker came up to me and she said, "So you're going to meet your family tomorrow?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, great. Sure." And I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect it to be that soon. And she was like, "Is that okay?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, that's why I'm here. Let's do it." So my mom and I and my social worker went out and had lunch together, and then went to meet my birth family. And we got there first, and we went up to this room that was so ugly, and it was like yellowish linoleum floors, and like there's weird chairs that are totally square that are really uncomfortable with like the square arms. We were sitting there and waiting, and my dad was the first person to come in the door, and he looked like he was lost. And seeing my dad was just so strange, because I don't know what I thought he would look like in real life, but he did not look at all like how I pictured him, even though I'd seen a picture of him. And then I think my sister came in next, and my sister is 2 years younger than me. And then my mom came in, and my brother was unable to come because in Korea they do a mandatory 2-year serve in the army. And so he had already started his serve, and so he couldn't get time off to come in and meet me. And we just talked for like 3 or 4 hours. And it was funny because we'd had those 2 years of communication. They already knew a lot about me, and I already knew a lot about them, and we'd already kind of discovered a lot of similarities. But I remember my dad was like, "I watch a lot of American news, and I want to make sure you're okay." And I was like, "Oh God, no, I'm fine. Like, let's..." And he asked me if I had a boyfriend. And I laughed and said no. And he said, "Does that mean you really do have one?" And I said, "No, it means I don't." And we had gifts, because it's customary, like you just bring gifts for everyone you meet in Korea. And I got my sister and I matching bracelets. And it was funny because my sister had necklaces made of our names, our Korean names. And so she gave me one that matched one that she already had. And so we already had this like connection of like, we both want to be matching. And then we gave my dad a pocket watch, and he laughed because he had wanted to get me a pocket watch. And just like other things too about spending time with them, that it was so surreal and so kind of like kismet happening, that like clearly we were a family, and clearly we were all like ready for this to happen and to meet each other. I met them the first time. We had lunch a second day. We went shopping a third day, when I was very hungover and had to get in the car. And my birth mom, kept asking if I was okay because I like wasn't talking, and I clearly did not look good. And so my social worker was like, "Well, what should I tell her?" And I was like, "Just tell her I don't feel good." But then it made her go into this whole like, "Do you need some herbs? Do we need to stop somewhere? Like, what do you need? Do you want to go home and rest?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, just tell her I'm hungover." So my social worker told them I was hungover, and my birth mom, like, burst out laughing. My dad was laughing. My sister wasn't there. And they were like, okay, well, we'll take you to get some food. We know exactly what you need. And so we got to the mall, and I was so embarrassed because here I am, like, seeing my birth family, and I'm hungover in Korea. And they took me to some restaurant, and they ordered me some food that looked like rice porridge, possibly. And it tasted great. It looked gross, and it made me feel so much better. And I don't know what it was. And again, that's just like another case where they like didn't care, like no judgment. They like loved me no matter what. And then I got to one of the best parts of the trip was when they invited me to spend the night at their house. And so I remember my social worker came up and she was like, so they've invited you to sleep over. How do you want to? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, because I wouldn't have a translator there was a big thing. I had a translator. My social worker had been with us and translating the entire time. So I would be completely on my own. And at first I said no and wasn't sure. And then I kind of was like, wait, you're only in Korea? Like, basically this one time, you don't know when you're coming back. Like, you came to meet your birth family. Just like suck it up and go. And so I got to spend the night with them at their house and see where they lived. And then I slept in my sister's bed, which was like a rock. It was so hard. It was so uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But my sister slept on the floor, and I remember we were laying there, and she was like, I don't know what we talked about boys, and asked if she had a boyfriend, and we just like chatted, and it was great.
What were these interactions in like broken English?
My sister knew English when we first started writing back and forth, but I think once she found out I was coming, she practiced harder because she thought she was bad at it, but she really wasn't. My mom kind of spoke English. She understood a lot. My dad just had like no clue what was happening, like in true dad fashion, right? Just like, wait, what? Just what did she say? What are you saying?
I don't get it.
And then we'd tell him, and he would like nod, like, yeah, I get it. And you're like, you don't get it. And yeah, so then they like dropped me off at the hotel the next day, and I remember my dad saying that he really wanted my sister and my brother and I to be like a real family and to like never forget each other and like always take care of each other, and which was like obviously yes. What I didn't expect was for my birth family to feel so much regret and sin. Like they felt so awful for giving me up for adoption, where I had never looked at it as like I was adopted because my parents didn't love me or because they didn't want me or I felt abandoned. And I never actively, I may have subconsciously thought that, but I never actively thought that. And I was never mad, and I never had that attitude towards my adoptive parents as like, you're not my real mom and dad, because they are my real mom and dad. And I think that's one thing I will never get over is how guilty my parents felt for not raising me themselves, which in my mind, they are like the most amazing people and I will ever know in my life. To have a child and then to choose to put it up for adoption specifically so that your child can have a better life is like the most selfless thing I can think of. And it kills me to think that they see themselves in a very negative light. And even when we met, I remember my adopted mom, all she could say to my birth parents was how grateful they were for them and for me, and to be able to have this child that they couldn't. I think my parents couldn't have a kid or something. And so because of this choice that my birth family made, that my birth mom or birth dad made, they were able to have a family. And I don't know that ever got across, or my dad thought that I was so mad at him. And even when I met him, he was so like distraught over the idea that like I might not love him or want to see him or meet him. And like even after years of correspondence, that was like still something that like was very present in his mind. And I don't think there's anything that I could do or say, or that my adoptive parents could do or say to kind of make that guilt go away. And I don't know what it's like to give up a child for adoption, and I can't imagine, but you know, to me, they're they're like the bravest people. And I just wish that they knew that. I didn't think that knowing my birth family would add anything to my life. I thought it would just be another fact about myself, and I turned out to be very wrong because I found them at exactly the right time when I needed them. And I think if I had done a search any earlier, it wouldn't have made that impact, or it would have fallen differently on my life. I remember I met a mom of an adopted child randomly, and she was like, "Oh, are you adopted?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." And she was like, "Yes, my child's adopted too. We're trying to decide when is the right time to start her birth family search." And I was like, "You can't decide that. That's not for you to decide. You don't get to choose when she's ready. She will tell you when she's ready." Because at that time I was only like 19 and I sure wasn't ready. And I think that, no one can tell you when you're ready for something like that. And no one can tell you when is the right time or when is the wrong time, or you should have this and this and this checked off before you search for them or meet them, because being adopted is very personal and how you feel about that is very personal. No one can understand what it's like to be adopted unless you are. And no one can understand what it's like to have an adopted child unless you do. Family is just whoever loves you unconditionally and is there to support you no matter what.
Okay, that's it. That was episode number 2. You just heard from Julia. One of the things that we're excited to share with you about a Face Project podcast are the photographs that we feature of our storytellers. For this episode, Dan and I spent the afternoon with Julia at her home in Excelsior, Minnesota. She introduced us to her cats, and we took some photographs around her home before the interview. She also was able to share with us a number of photos of her biological family, including her parents and her siblings, as well as her parents at home in Minnesota. You can view photographs of Julia and all of our storytellers on our website. Visit afaceproject.com and look under the podcast menu. We invite you to tune in twice a month as we publish new episodes featuring stories told by volunteers from around the world. And to learn more about other ways to listen to A Face Project stories, or if you wish to subscribe, visit afaceproject.com/ways to listen. This episode was edited and produced by myself, Natalie Jennings, and Daniel Zamzow. Photography, Natalie Jennings. Web layout and design by Aaron Woods. All of the music you heard in today's story is sampled from Hattie Wilcox. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode in a couple of weeks.
And this ring, actually, my birth mom gave to me off her hand as we were saying goodbye after meeting for the first time. We hugged, and she was like, "I want you to have this." And she took it off her finger and put it on my hand. And so this is her ring. And I just switched hands, but I've not been without it since then. So this is my family. This is my family.